Welcome back, everyone. Let's go through continuing to chat through what we're seeing with our console logs now that we have a clear, accurate example and knowledge of what's happening. So again, we hit our initial render for our category component. Our selector fired gets called because we're calling useSelector for the first time. The effect fires calling setProducts. And here you might wonder, Yihua, why is it that our effect fired calling setProducts, but then we didn't re-render? Well, the reason why is because our initial state for products is categories map at category. Categories map, by default, gives us an empty object if the array is empty, because select categories reduces over categories. The default value for categories is actually an empty array, if you remember, inside of our category reducer. So if you reduce over an empty array, you get an empty object. If you call any value on an empty object, what you're going to get back is undefined. So our initial state, of course, is going to be undefined. Similarly, with this setProducts, we're setting it to undefined. So if you set a previous value of undefined to a new value of undefined, well, remember, React is smart enough that when you're calling setState and you're trying to set it to a value that it using equality, strict equality, determines is true, it will not trigger a re-render. Why would it do so? It's realized that what you're trying to set is something that it already has. That means that it doesn't need to re-render this component. There's no re-rendering that needs to happen. So this is why you might see the effect fire, but again, we're not going to re-render because setProducts is not actually re-rendering the component. So moving on from here, we then wait and see, oh, at this point, actually, the synchronous nature of our code has ended. Our auth listener is actually what's triggering, because from our auth listener, we are getting from Firebase, oh, you have an active session. This active session then triggers an action to dispatch setCurrentUser with the payload of the user. From here, what happens is that current state, of course, once again logs inside of our logger. We call next, and then our reducers update. Our reducers update re-triggering our selectors. But notice here that our selector is causing this component to re-render, despite the fact that we know that only the user object is what has updated from the reducer. The categories reducer has not changed because our categories reducer does not respond to setCurrentUser. So here is where useSelector, we have to take a little bit of a deep dive into it. useSelector, as I mentioned, runs every time that the state object has updated in the root reducer. However, it only re-renders this component if the return of the selector function you pass to it is different. So here you might be wondering, well, Yihua, I don't understand. Our selector should be always returning the same value, right? Because the original categories array hasn't changed. It's an empty array. This is where it has to do with the way that we composed our logic. Our logic here with reduce, what I want you to realize is that reduce is always returning back a new object. The reason why is because after running reduce, what our code says is that I want to build up the accumulator, which is starting with an empty object, and then you return that back. Every time, though, we're using a net new object here. So this is where you need to think a little bit about your code composition. Now, one of the trade-offs we made when we created this selecting of our categories map to abstract the logic into an selector rather than do it so that we store the categories map when we fetch it from Firebase is that every time the selector runs, we will be rerunning this logic. Now, as I mentioned, as a result of this logic, we're always getting back a new object, which means that our useSelector will never be able to properly cache that value, pass the equality check, and therefore not cause any unnecessary re-renders. Would it not be great if instead we only ran this selector if the categories object change that we get back from our reducer, meaning that the only time we should run this logic to derive a new categories map is if our category reducer returned a new object, and that should only happen if the action corresponds to something in our reducer that triggers that change. Well, this is actually where we want to leverage a new library. It's a very popular library called Reselect inside of the Redux ecosystem that specifically addresses this exact topic. And that's what we're going to learn in the next video. So join me and we'll figure out how to tackle this and learn all about Reselect. I'll see you in the next video.